Philosopher Rudolf Steiner spoke of supernatural beings feeding on negative human emotions. We know that even humans feed on negative human emotions. They do it as a psychological game. It's what we call energy vampires. Sometimes you see them, for example, bosses against their employees, or teachers against their students, or abbots against the monastics, things like that. Even some parents with their children. Now, anxiety, depression, and fear ravage so many today, but few pause to consider that in addition to the material influences in our lives, we may be also under the influence of beings which exist in dimensions outside of our ordinary perception. And here we're talking about the spiritual entities. Now, there is much more to reality than what we can see and feel, hear, taste, and touch. In fact, an accounting of the matter that makes up the universe reveals that some 73% of it is made up of dark energy, and another 23% is made up of dark matter, neither of which we can see nor understand. Furthermore, the human eye is capable of only seeing around 0.0035% of the entire spectrum of electromagnetic EM radiation. And when we look into the heavens, 96% of it is invisible to us, including in this the realms, and there is an entire universe of possibilities which exist beyond our five senses. And here I want to tell you about the angelic realms. We, many times in our little church of St. Sozon in Athens, Greece, have seen, through the lens of a camera, the light entities of angels during the baptism sacrament, for example. Our eyes couldn't see them, but the camera picked up this electromagnetic frequency. So they are there. Finally, support my Patreon account. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box. Now, there's more than we can see with our perceptions. Very few scientists today are willing to explore metaphysics to examine life beyond ordinary perception in order to make a connection between the seen and the unseen. Rudolf Steiner, though, one of the most prolific and gifted scientists, philosophers, and esoterics of his time, devoted much of his work to the task of peering behind the veil, sharing his insight into the deeper nature of life and the world beyond. In other words, various dimensions. Regarding anxiety and depression, Steiner spoke of hostile beings in the spiritual world which influence and feed off of human emotion, a concept flatly rejected by most today. Yet this analysis also holds true for shamans and others who access the spiritual dimensions in order to alleviate mental suffering for their patients. Many are familiar with the notion of energy vampires, or people who suck your energy and feed off your negative emotions, on the existence of similar entities which exist in other dimensions. This is what Steiner wrote. There are beings in the spiritual realms of whom anxiety and fear emanating from human beings offer welcome food. When humans have no anxiety and fear, then these creatures starve. And let's remember what we have in the epistles of St. John in the New Testament. He says, don't fear, fear not. Okay, have peace, shalom. When Jesus Christ was appearing to his believers, he would say the first thing was, I give you my peace, meaning shalom. That's a greeting even today in Israel. Now, when humans have no anxiety and fear, then these creatures starve. People not yet sufficiently convinced of this statement could understand it to be meant comparatively only, but for those who are familiar with this phenomenon, it is a reality. If fear and anxiety radiates from people and they break out in panic, then these creatures find welcome nutrition and they become more and more powerful. According to what Steiner says, these beings are hostile towards humanity. So what does that make them? It makes them, of course, the opposite of good. They are evil. Now, everything that feeds, he says, on negative feelings, on anxiety, fear, and superstition, despair, or doubt are in reality hostile forces in sensible worlds, launching cruel attacks on human beings while they're being fed. Therefore, it's above all necessary to begin with that person The person who enters the spiritual world overcomes fear, feelings of helplessness, despair, and anxiety. But these are exactly the feelings that belong to contemporary culture and materialism because it estranges people from the spiritual world. It is especially suited to evoke hopelessness and fear of the unknown in people, thereby calling up the above-mentioned hostile forces against them, end quote. And that's a quote by Rudolf Steiner. Now, negative emotions are food for inimical spirits, a concept which, such as this, is not readily acceptable into everyday conversation, steered by rigid skepticism and scientific materialism. The traditionalists of today have sought to expel ancient metaphysical wisdom and its practical application from our lives. And though scientific inquiry is exceptionally valuable, spiritual perception has always been a part of our experience. Bernard Gunther says, and yet, despite the cynical skepticism, all of the ancient mystery schools, true shamanic insights, and esoteric teachings, much of which have been suppressed and or distorted over thousands of years for obvious reasons, have conveyed this truth for the ones with eyes to see and ears to hear, using their own language and symbolism, be it the general law, esoteric Christianity, archons or gnostics, lords of destiny, hermeticism, predator flyers, the topics of all topics, shamanism, castaneda, the evil magician, Gurdjieff, the shaitans, Sufism, the jinn, Arabian mythology, the jinn being demons, Wetiko, Native American spirituality, occult hostile forces, Sri Aurobindo and Mother, the internal yoga, etc. Now, dealings with extrasensory or hyperdimensional beings have long been a part of our history and are directly accessible to any of us when proper practice and attention is given to the matter. I know this to be true from my experiences with plant medicine, shamanism, where it's entirely possible to enter into states of consciousness where entire cosmologies of life exist and are available to interact with. Finding oneself in the rut of spiraling negative self-talk, depression, crippling anxiety, or uncontrollable irrational fear is a sign, as Steiner points out, of a disconnect from our true spiritual nature, exacerbated by beings who operate in the spiritual realms. This is why some consider disorders like this to be spiritual illnesses, and until the rift is healed, with proper attention given to the development of spirit, the feelings tend to exacerbate and drive one further into distress. Rudolf Steiner says, when humans have no anxiety and fear, then these creatures starve. So this is by Dylan Charles, editor of Waking Times, and also it's on Bended Reality. And if you want to have some very nice examples of interactions with angels, you have them in the Old Testament and the New Testament. One of the very nice passages having to do with St. Peter being released from prison by an angel of God. And then when St. Peter went back to find the apostles, when he knocked on the door, one of the women went to answer, and she said, "Oh, it must be Peter's angel because he's got the same voice as Peter." And she didn't open immediately until Peter said, "It's not my angel, it's me." Meaning that these people from the ancient Hebrew faith knew about angels. They very well were conversed and knew about the angelic realms and the spiritual entities in other dimensions. So for her to say it must be his angel meant that Peter's guardian angel, was able to take on the same voice as Peter had. So if you want to find out the exact, even in the Maccabees, when the angel of God said, "Look up above you, see what do you see?" They said, "We see a war, we see entities fighting each other." And the angel said, "Yes, that's correct." In other words, the angel was able to show them what goes on above them in the other dimensions. So there's a lot there you can garner from reading the Holy Bible in many ways concerning spiritual battles and entities. Please leave your comments and thank you for your support.